Well, happy Saturday, listeners. I'm recording this episode on a Saturday, and thank you for listening to Lament of Hope podcast. And I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And today I'm very excited. I'm speaking with Lisa Purdue. I'm sorry, Purtue, and she is a former female correctional officer. But now she just finished her master's degree, she was telling me, which is big a number of books in the background for those watching. Those are all the books that she's had to plow through. But she's now a counselor and she works with people who struggle with substance abuse. And she has a passion for that, and she has a passion for uncovering aspects of the prison system that could use some improvement, putting it mildly. But she wrote a self-published memoir in December of 2024, I believe, about her time as a female correctional officer. And I was really fascinated, and I thought this is perfect to have her on the show and come on because I've had other individuals who shared their prison experience, and that was from just a typical prison from the prisoner perspective. But Lisa actually, it was her job for a while. And so it's really interesting to get to have her perspective here. And then also, she now has a master's degree in mental health. So she's got this more, a wider perspective of not only what she's seen, but now she's working as a counselor. So it's a really interesting balance that she's got to have and a window into a world that a lot of us aren't able to go to. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Danielle. I appreciate it.
So, Lisa, I want to ask you first of all, I've not met many people in my life who have wanted to be a correctional officer. You don't really get many women, especially where it's like, what's your dream job or what do you want to do? And they're like, yeah, I want to work in a prison. And most people, I have never had that. So how did that happen for you? Like, did you want to do that? You knew that for a while, or did that just that's where life led you, or how did that happen?
Um, to start off with, I had worked in the printing industry for approximately 16 years. And a lot of people would come to me and ask me questions or what my suggestions were to help them. And I really actually entered the printing industry because of my dad. Um, It was something that we both had a passion for. We had a passion for drawing and art. And I entered that field with the opportunity and passion that I had in the arts. And I found over time, really looking back at the things I wanted to leave as a legacy for my own kids. And I really didn't want my kids to think, you know, um, this is what mom did. And is that something that I want my kids to think of, if something ever happened to me, in their mind thinking, wow, mom made a really good Playboy centerfold. And that's all I had to offer to the world is, being at a company, learning all aspects of the print field from start to finish, and then entering in another printing company who printed Playboy centerfolds, and I had to go in there and manipulate the pictures and clean them up. And I'm just like, is this really something I want to do? And it was a male dominated um, opportunity that I had entered in doing that.
Right.
In that regard, I'm thinking, there's got to be more to life, and I need to start living for myself and not for my dad. So I broke away from that, wanting to give back more to not only fulfill my purpose, what I felt like that was not my purpose. My purpose was to help other people. And I always wanted to be a social worker, believe it or not. And I had an opportunity that popped up where they were looking for corrections officers. And I'm like, I really love talking to people. I want to help others to see their own potential in their life and have a purpose instead of, just like you said, people don't raise their hand and say, you know what? I want to be a corrections officer or be a felon. That doesn't happen. Things happen to people that contribute to them being incarcerated. It's not what they actually, I mean, it is what actually they do by making poor choices and bad decisions. It has a lot of other factors involved in that. It could be environmental, it could be something genetic happen where they have addiction running through their family. It could be numerous other things, attachment issues. It could be a variety of situations that people are put in and they make a poor decision instead of leaving the situation. So in that aspect, before I even entered corrections, I realized how broken of a person I was at the time, coming from a family of dysfunction, and how to start healing myself. And then I'm looking at this opportunity like, this could be something that I could build on and grow and learn from this opportunity and how I help other people to build on their life and the opportunities that they may come into or have. The first prison that I worked at was a short-term prison. It was pretty much of a holding facility. A lot of people are on probation and parole. That's what it was made
Okay.
for people that are coming and going. And I saw a lot of, when I entered the field, I'm like, oh my gosh, after the 2 months of training, um, we all, the whole group that we had, we started off with, I think there was 600 people that applied. 190 made it to the classroom because you had to, at that time, go through a physical agility test. You had to do paper tests. You had to um, prove that you had the ability to help your coworker if something happened. Um,
And how
so
old were you at the time that you became a correctional officer or were going in this direction?
37.
Okay. Career change at 37.
Yes, big career change. A lot happened in my life that year. I was going through a divorce. I was transitioning from one job to another totally different career. I had 3 children. I survived a severe motorcycle accident before this happened. There was
Mm.
a lot of transitions that had happened in my life at that time, and I truly was blessed to even make it in. And they took me right away. They asked me one question and I answered it, and they're like, you know what? We want to hire you. Because my whole intent was to bring my my passion to help other people. And that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be known for, like I just said, a printer, somebody that um, focused on the fine details of things, listened to people, all those things that I had accumulated of experience in that field, I brought into this field. I
Right.
paid
Yeah.
attention to the details. I honed my skills in communication. There was a lot of other things that I needed to learn that were not taught. They did not focus on just women in general and having a separate class for women going into this. They had us all together. And I truly believe that there needs to be a separate class of training for women when they're going into this field. It's not just about hostage situations. It's about communicating properly and also being aware of your surroundings, because you're not only going to get approached by the gentleman that you're supervising. And I worked in two mostly male maximum security prisons. You're going to get approached by the gentleman that you're supervising, and you're going to get approached by male staff.
Hmm.
So you have a double-edged sword there just because you're a woman, period, in this career that could change your life depending upon every single day. Every single day is going to be different for you, and you're going to have to um, quell arguments, fights. Um, you're going to be exposed to all different kinds of diseases and things that are brought in from the folks that are coming in. You're going to be exposed to huge injuries and complications from those injuries. You're going to come in contact with people that have uh, cognitive dysfunctions,
Hmm.
people that have been severely injured, people that have been on the street for a very long period of time that have enormous amounts of medical issues. Um, you're going to come in contact with your coworkers that you may not like very much because of the way they treat people.
Yeah.
Um, you're going to come in contact with your coworkers that want to set you up to fail because you're a woman. So these are all the things that are coming into play while you're also trying to maintain control of a unit. And that unit can be compromised of up to, or I'm sorry, from 35 people, which was a special needs unit that I worked on that had a lot of folks that had severe cognitive dysfunction and that needed to be on psychotropic medications, to up to 110 gentlemen that you're in charge of by yourself, with
Wow.
a sergeant that's overseeing it. And sometimes that sergeant was sleeping, sometimes that sergeant was awake and aware, sometimes the sergeant would come in under the influence of alcohol mixed in with whatever psychotropic meds they're on. So you're dealing with a whole lot of stuff. And for me, when I with my gentleman, I had to walk the walk and talk the talk. I'm not
Yeah.
going to come in there under the influence of anything. I have to be focused, number one, on not only my safety, but also the safety of those that I'm supervising.
So this class that started with 190 people, after that, how many graduated from the class?
90,
90.
90.
So you lost 100 people. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Well, the training is probably pretty intense too, right?
Yes, it's like a military training.
Yeah. So
And
Lisa, when you started this job, I mean, just from the description you gave briefly, it sounds like a very high stress. Kind of, I mean, very different from the printing, you know? For you, what was, when you first, like the first day on the job, was there something that totally surprised you that you just were not expecting, no matter how trained you were?
I I came upon people that I would have never met in my entire life. People that were going through um, transition, either from female to male or male to female. I never was exposed to that. I was never exposed to driving down to um, a central city in the state where it was separated from other parts of the city because it was so um, segregated from other parts. So it was not a good area to be driving down by myself. Um, I was not aware that I'm going to be ordered doubles consistently, um, whether it be once a week, whether it be, 3, 4 times a week. It just depended on who was coming in, and, your coworker on the third shift didn't show up, so you got to stay. Um, and I had 3 kids at home. So I had to finagle that whole situation, and I only had one phone call out.
Hmm.
Some officers paid each other. Can you take my shift? Here, I'll give you $50 if you take my. Oh, yeah. Um, I did learn a lot, and what they taught us in training, some of it, I had to learn how to flow from that into how they were doing it at that specific prison.
Right.
There was things that I I needed to just relax and just go with the flow, so to speak, and not follow anybody else. I focused on what the rules and regulations were on each unit. Other officers, they did whatever the heck they wanted to do. Um, I did not know that I was going to be exposed to as much as I was. Um, I do have, once in a while, I have um, I used to have nightmares of being locked in a cell with 2 people, and that was a reoccurring nightmare that I would wake up from. The trauma that I was going to experience, seeing what I saw. I mean, once you see it, you can't unsee things. You can't just go to the bathroom and wash your eyes out and pretend like you didn't just see that. Um, some pretty harsh things, very bloody incidences. Um, it kind of brings me back, and I wanted to make sure that some of those stories were in my book so then people could have a good eye view of what goes on, because I didn't think I was going to get exposed to you know really bloody instances or even death. um it's not like being in combat. However, you're locked inside with the gentleman that on that floor. You're locked in there. There's no way out. Over time, I would always think, okay, where can I go safely and lock myself in if something went down? So that would be the first thing that I would think of when I would go onto a unit. Is
Yeah.
over time is, where can I lock myself in that I'll be safe if something goes down? But I used a lot of my voice to quell situations and try to mediate, because this is a life and death for me. I could say the wrong thing and get smacked or punched or beaten up. Um, with the grace of God, that never happened. Um,
Hmm.
and you have to tolerate things that you can't take personal, because you're going to be called names all day long for 8 hours a day, the most grossest things that you'd ever want to be called. And you just have to either ignore it, or you can deflect it or twist it into making fun of yourself. And then that gets people to say, we'll just leave her alone, because we're not getting that reaction that we want out of her. So it's maneuvering around in ways vocally that you bring your presence there and really be fair and just while you're conducting yourself.
Yeah. Was there a particular unit that you found extremely challenging to work with?
Um, Particular, I would say the unit that had uh, very extraordinary needs. These were folks that had to be on psychotropic medications, highly sedated. people that had enormous amounts of different DSM pathologies.
Yeah.
Um, I was on one unit. This is the same unit, but one person that I was there for only like a couple days and introduced to a gentleman that didn't want his hand. And he made every effort to make sure that his hand got infected all the time with various things. And he would cut it open and he just said that his hand was evil. I've never experienced that in my life. I had people
Hmm.
that had pica. Um, pica is a diagnosis where somebody takes objects and they swallow them. And I had a really wonderful conversation with that individual to figure out, just how he operated, what was going on, what triggered him to swallow objects. And he was open to giving me all the information. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I really wanted to connect with the gentleman that I was working with and find out things that triggered them to do what they were doing. Um, Sometimes I would get answers, sometimes not. Um, and there's a couple of individuals that ended up either at the other institution that I worked with, and they recognized me and they're like, I know you from somewhere. And I'm like, I'm from somewhere too. I'm very good at cases. I had one gentleman, during the night, I was ordered for an overnight shift after my second shift. And I'm going around and doing my normal rounds. And he's like, I remember you. You were at such and such prison. And I'm like, yes, I was. And I said, and I remember you too. I said, you were the one that cheeked your meds. And I called you out on it because you were supposed to swallow those meds. And then you had a temper tantrum. Do you remember that? He's like, your memory is really good.
Yeah, he blocked out that part.
He says, the reason why I did that was because I didn't want to be on those meds because it made me zombie-like and it was not a good feeling for me. That's the reason why I didn't want to be on them. And I
Hmm.
says, it's really too bad that you didn't tell me that at that time because I may have been able to email a doctor or the social worker to let them know how those medications were making you feel because we have so many other alternatives. He was like, you know what? I probably should have sat down and talked to you, but I did check my meds, by the way, even though I denied it at the time. And I said, I know. And he apologized to me. And I says, you know what? That was cool of you. I really appreciate that. And he's like, I'm sorry I gave you such a hard time. I said, you know what? It's okay. It's in the past and we move forward. And I said, I'm just sorry that you're back here again.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, he says, nice talking to you. And then he went to bed. And I thought that was really nice. When you treat people fairly and just, he eventually will come back to you. I never had to pull a weapon, which was great. Even though when I was in one of the five towers, at one prison, we had to load and unload and make sure that we had the appropriate amount of bullets for either the rifle and or the shotgun. And I would keep the doors closed in that while I was checking everything for my initial shift because we have to account for everything. And when I was done, then I would open the doors so to get air in because at this time it was summer or fall and I wanted to get a little fresh air and I just kind of walk out on there's an outside like deck that goes around the top of the tower. And it was purposefully done that way so then I wouldn't trigger anyone's fear when they were outside walking around and having rec. I wanted them to enjoy their rec and not be um, fall to the ground because they heard the sound of the shotgun, you know, switching to load a bullet.
Right.
So there's different things that I did that I really wanted to lessen the trauma that these gentlemen were going through just being incarcerated. I look at this population as being the most traumatized population who are incarcerated. They already have a lot of trauma coming in, and you don't want to add to that trauma being in that space.
I would think that you're probably, I mean, I would want to speak to a lot more people before I said this, but your perspective is something that, even as you seem to allude before, isn't something that everyone has. A lot of people do see this as just a job or an opportunity to maybe take out their own anger on the world. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I can imagine working in a prison could really make your world seem pretty bleak because you're
Mhm.
seeing the darkest side of all. Like, we all are sinful, we all are capable of terrible things, but these people had committed it. And so you're in this place where you see all of the darkest parts of humanity always before you all the time. And
Mhm.
there's only so many ways you can handle that because it's its own trauma in itself that you're experiencing being there. Do With the other guards that you worked with, was your attitude kind of novel? Or did most people share your attitude? Or for the other guards you worked with, were they not as, passionate about connecting with the prisoners at the prison?
Um, let's just say, the requirements of being a correctional officer in the state that I live is only a high school diploma. Um, I cannot say that for a lot of some gentlemen there that have a lot of experience working with people in their approaches, because I've seen their genuine approaches to quell a situation or stop somebody from cutting. Um, However, the things that I hear in the background or I've been exposed to were very, very inappropriate. No, I don't think that people shared my thought process because I see these individuals as somebody's, whether it be their child, a parent, a uncle, a father. I see these people as human beings. I don't see these folks as um, being just collateral damage from society. Each one of these individuals can go back out. They could be your neighbor. And it's the way that you treat people in that area or that secured area. They're going to get out at some point. I actually had a lot of the gentlemen that I worked with journaling. um, and I called it a gratitude journal. And I said, every single day, you write something that you are grateful for from the day, right before you go to sleep. So then it would help. It helps with depression and anxiety because of the environment that they're in. But when they do get out, they're going to see these are the things that I lost going back in, and maybe I need to rethink a poor decision. I
Yeah.
wanted them to have that opportunity to say, you know what, I really missed mom's homemade cookies, or I missed walking on grass without my shoes, or I miss, going fishing with my family. These are the things you're going to lose again if you go out and you commit a crime or violate a probationary rule or regulation. Um, these are the things you're going to lose. I mainly did that at the maximum security prison I worked at, and that was the intake of the entire state. Anyone that got sent there, and it was like a hub. So folks would be on my units from 8 to 21, 22 weeks before they're distributed to other uh, prisons, either it's a maximum, medium, or a minimum, depending upon the severity of their offense.
So if yours was a maximum security prison, is that like first degree murder? Is that more of
Yeah.
okay. So
So
would that be the like this is such a weird way to say this, but I don't know the right term. Would that be like the most popular kind of crime that people are coming for? Was it they had killed someone or
uh, at that facility, it was a variety. Some
okay.
folks would be sent to a minimum based on their behavior or the crime. There's other people that committed a murder and were sentenced, and they're just sitting there to go to one or two other facilities that hold a maximum security inmate. And I hate to use the term inmate, even though they are. However, I use the term gentleman. It was my way of giving respect to the gentleman, and it was also reverse psychology. When people are called a gentleman or sir or their last name, they have a tendency of wanting to act like that. And that's how I used reverse psychology in that form. Um, the dignity and respect that anyone deserves. I would want my child to be called every nasty name possible if he was serving time in prison. So that's how I look at it. I did have one of my children go to jail, and
Hmm.
I wanted my child to be treated with dignity and respect. And if he had a health issue, I would want to have that be addressed. So that happened before I went into corrections. So these are the things that I brought with me from my own personal experience. I don't want my child to be called, every name in the book. I don't use vulgar language. I'd never use vulgar language to any of the gentlemen that I supervised. I would learn their names and I would call them their name, like Mr. Johnson or Mr. Jones, or I would try to get the pronunciation correctly. So then it's when people hear their last name, it's like, oh, she remembered me.
Yeah.
It's not for something, bad or anything that they did. It was just giving them that respect. It humanizes that person.
Did you find any particular, because I know you're a mom, so I can think being a mother, there would be certain crimes that would hit really hard at the heart being a mother. And
Mhm.
so, were there any crimes or any individuals in particular who had committed a crime that you found hard to treat with respect just because of the nature of the crime?
There's many times, many, many cases that we didn't know what they were in for. And I think that was set up the way that it's supposed to be. So we treat everyone with dignity and respect.
I see. So, do you often not know what the person's done?
Often, yes, I did not
Okay.
know unless I needed to take them out of the facility because there were times where I had to take gentlemen out of the facility and take them to the hospital or transfer them to another facility to work or whatnot. Um, I needed to know that just, if they're a runner or they've stabbed somebody, I needed to be aware of that. And they would let me know just in case. So I would be on, heightened alertness regarding that individual because I
Right.
didn't want, I mean, even sitting in a hospital room with individuals, I had to sit there and make sure that they were not only being treated effectively, but we had to make sure that they were handcuffed or had their leg irons on appropriately.
Right.
Um, I had an instance where me and a coworker replaced two new officers, and one of them had, uh, they must have ate the person's food because they had potatoes stuck to their face in their uniform. When they left, um, they they had this person handcuffed to the bed, both hands on each side and both legs cuffed to the bed bottom. So this person couldn't move anywhere, but yet they were paralyzed. They couldn't even feed themselves. This person didn't even have water. And me and another senior officer, as soon as they left, we took the handcuffs off of their arms. We only had a leg iron on, and that was the way it was supposed to be. Just a leg iron because they're not going to go anywhere. But the gentleman was paralyzed. He wasn't going anywhere regardless. The point being is that they didn't treat him with any humanity or respect. And all he was asking for is water. And I could tell he was without water for a long period of time because his lips were so chapped that the skin was starting to peel off of his lips. And that's disgraceful. You don't treat this could be somebody's grandfather, for goodness sake. And I wouldn't want somebody to think that I would treat somebody like that. I would never do that. Um, so I was able to go and get this person some water with a straw so then they could drink some water. And this person started crying, literally crying there and thanking me for helping him to get some water. I mean, that's sad. That just that just hurt my heart to think that two other my coworkers would allow the indignity to continue. That's cruel. That's cruel and unusual.
What
Um,
what you mentioned before that there are certain things you wrote your book in part because you wanted people who would never step foot into a correctional facility to be able to get an eye and a picture of what it would be like to be in one because you desire there to be positive change.
mhm.
What are some pretty common um, behaviors or common actions or common misactions that you saw working there as a correctional officer at both of the prisons? Maybe they overlapped in some of these things that you think should be changed to make the prison experience a safer or more humanitarian place.
Uh, for me, I think the state that I worked in has the most incarcerated people of all 50 states. The most. What needs to be done is to tear it down to the foundation and rebuild it because it's not healing. We're re-traumatizing people. We're bringing officers in that treat people like crap or say really, really inappropriate things when it's not your judgment. That was done in a court of law. You are not the judge. You are there to make sure that your gentlemen are being taken care of properly. That's what your job is. Your job is to make sure that they're all alive when you leave, that they're getting their medications, because we also gave them their medications.
Right.
We go around and I would wear gloves and I would pop out, and it would take me an hour for 100 gentlemen to get that done. Um, we are, as an officer, you're responsible for handing out their mail, making sure they have clean clothes. You're making sure that they are getting food that's that's edible. I have no control of how it's delivered to the institution, but I will tell you the boxes that it comes in says for inmate and military use only, which is really shocking to me. It should just be food. It shouldn't have specific purpose like only for military or inmates. Like these are throwaway people. These are not throwaway people. Um, in either regard. Um, some advocates will say, well, our veterans, need to be given the best and whatnot. Everybody deserves to get the best. I have both my sons who served in the military, very honorably, and my spouse. Um, Unfortunately, one of my sons came back with a severe brain injury and PTSD. Um, those are things that we don't understand because I had veterans on my units too. Um, because of the PTSD and the reactions that they were having brought them to that area, whether it be an addiction, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be, a flashback and they reacted. Um, it's really important to address these things. What I feel that there needs to be done is to have more licensed counselors come in and have um, a, group of people that are assigned to them and have more groups, have more interactions, one-on-one counseling with these gentlemen before they leave the facilities and are released back into society. They also have to be prepared for certain jobs, having residence. We have a lot of folks that are on the street, they're homeless because they have mental health issues. When they're released, they only get a week or two of medication. And then once that medication's gone, they're off their meds again. And then a couple weeks later, I would see the same people coming back. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Um, Probation and parole, they are overwhelmed. Probation and parole, God bless their souls. They are overwhelmed with a lot of people that they have to oversee. So having those, client lists split up a little bit more so they have less, just like a counselor. I mean, you wouldn't give a counselor 75, 80 people to work with. You'd maybe give them, like 30 or 40 people to work with.
Yeah, and even that is considered max. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And you see them every week. Um, Education. A lot of the gentlemen that come in, there was a huge amount that were illiterate. They couldn't even read. And I was astounded at the books that they had in their little library. Some units would have a library right there. And I would make the list of the month, I would post that up, list of the month, and these are the books that are really good. And it would get people to read those certain books, which is really great. I think I was the only one doing that, with the permission of the floor manager. Um, I just really wanted to go a little bit out of my way to make sure that people were seen, they were given the opportunity to look up their law stuff. They were given books that, a lot of learning, a lot of growth, even teaching people how to read in that. And we didn't have enough teachers. Um, there's a lot of things that we could do a lot better than what's going on now. It's sometimes it's almost like it's a rite of passage. It's seen as a rite of passage for people to come in, and it's not. It's not the life that you would want. It's not something to brag about. Um, um, yeah, I've had this is on a different subject, but back to the food. I actually threw out a whole container of tomatoes that had mold on them, black mold, and they were serving burgers that day. And I looked at that and, that's part of my job. I don't want my guys to get sick because, the nursing staff is going to get overwhelmed with people that have gotten sick. If I'm not going to eat it, I'm not going to give it to them to eat it. I called the food service or the kitchen to let them know, hey, your tomatoes all have black mold. You shouldn't be serving this. And they're like, what? We've given all the other units. So all the other units, nobody even called to say we got black mold on our tomatoes. Not a one. And my unit was one of the last units to get served. And I'm like, really? I'm the only one that paid attention? I'm not going to have, my guys eating rotten food. I'm sorry. Because I'm the one that's going to get the backlash. Number one, I wouldn't eat it. Number two, I will get the backlash or the potential of getting beaten up because I served rotten food.
Yeah.
And number three, I could have a riot because of people seeing that there's black mold all over this and nobody even said anything. Why would somebody even allow that to happen? So I took the whole thing after I showed it to them because they were mad, and the kitchen comes stomping down and why aren't you giving them the tomato? I'm like, look. And the whole thing was just covered in black mold. And they're like, oh, okay. It's like you got to show them proof before they actually believed you. I took that whole sucker and just threw it in the garbage. And I'm like, sorry, gentlemen, we're not going to have tomatoes today, but you can have the cheese and the lettuce and, you'll have your condiments. And they're like, okay, Miss P. And that's what they would call me, Miss P, because I couldn't pronounce my last name. But it, but it's like looking out. And if the gentleman realize that there is somebody that's looking out for them or trying to get them the services that they need, you're going to have a less likely of having, your officers getting assaulted. It's your approach to things um, and giving that decency and respect. No matter what they did, that's not my concern. That was done outside of there in a court setting. Um, is just giving them the humanity. I had a This is an example, and I think I wrote about it in my book about I had been called off of a unit to go and take a gentleman to the hospital with a new officer. And I get to intake, and they just had him change out, and it's in the middle of winter. We're having a snowstorm outside. It's, half a foot or so of snow. It's cold. This guy looks really sick, and he looks like John Coffey from the Green Mile. Believe it or not, this guy was huge. And he just had a light jumpsuit on, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. That's all he had on. The shirt was short sleeve. And I'm like, seriously? And I'm looking at a captain and a lieutenant, and I'm like, you guys couldn't get him a Coke or anything? And then they start making fun of him, both of them. Like, both of you didn't even have any common sense. You're going to sit there and make fun of this gentleman, and he's sick is the reason why we're taking him to the hospital, and you couldn't even think about finding a coat his size. I just kind of looked at them with disgust after I'm listening to this, and this man is listening to this. I went over, I had the new officer, I said, hang on tight right here. Sir, I'm going to go find you a coat quick. And so then I went through the coats and I tried to find like a 6X coat. So I did find a coat that I thought would be big enough. And then I just threw it around the back of him before we put him into the vehicle. And then you know, anything can happen, with you even strapping somebody in, they could, lunge forward and grab you by the face and bite you or bite your ear or whatnot. There's so many hazards to putting somebody in a vehicle, especially when they're upset or pissed off. So I said, sir, I'm going to just put this strap around you before we get going. And he's like, yes, ma'am. And I just strapped him in, and I noticed that he was crying a little bit. And I says, okay, everything's in. I'm going to shut the door now. Okay. And then I picked up the little chair thing that we had a little stool so he could step up in the van. And as soon as he stepped in that van went down. Like he was a big guy. And then I gently closed the door. I got in the passenger seat and I had the new officer drive us to the hospital. Soon as we got to the hospital, I said, it's right here. We park right here. I got out right away, opened the door, got the chair out so he could step down because he's got leg irons too. So that makes it very cumbersome. And and I said, sir, I'm going to take you out. I said, you're not going to run away from me, are you? And he's like, no, ma'am, I'm not. And he's still like tearing. I said, are you okay? And he's like, ma'am, that is the nicest thing that anybody's ever done for me since I got here.
Mhm.
Like, what the hell? And I'm thinking, I'm like, what the hell? Um, he's not going anywhere. Even if he did run, he's not going to run very far because he's got all of his chains on. But he was sick. He genuinely was sick and feeling crappy.
Right.
So I had him step down, and of course his feet got all wet because it's snow on the ground, and all he has is flip-flops on. So I really had to hang on to him so he wouldn't slip and fall in the snow. I shut the door. My other coworker came around, and then we escorted him into the building. And I'm like, we took him in. He was going to get taken care of. There were other officers there, and they're like, Purtue, we got this here. You can go back. And I'm like, okay. So me and the other officer, we went back to the institution. Those are the kinds of things where you're just like, what the hell? That's just rude and disrespectful to anybody. Nobody, I mean, we have people that have been convicted of crimes, very small percentage may not have ever committed those crimes. And this is the way that you treat people. You know, why?
Yeah.
How is that helping? Is it helping? No.
Did
It
you ever get attacked by anybody?
no.
Was
I
that
had
something that you feared a lot, or was it more of as over time, did you kind of become more comfortable and adjust to the environment that you didn't worry about that as much?
I don't I can say that I never was comfortable. I was never comfortable. I was always in fight and flight, because you don't know what's going to happen from
Sure.
moment to moment. You had to have strong boundaries, and there's folks that are hired that come in and they don't have any boundaries. They're telling these gentlemen everything. So you had to be careful of what you said to even your coworkers, because then the gentleman would know, oh, you came back from vacations? So how was, such and such? And like how did they know that I went there?
Right.
Because a coworker said something, because that's you shouldn't be talking about your coworkers within ears length of, the population you're supervising, because you don't know if there could be some manipulation going on. Um, but going back, I'm just going to give you a scenario of what happened to me within the first 15 minutes of me arriving on a shift. Um, this is just an example. I go through an x-ray machine regarding my property, and it has to be in a clear bag. I walk down, it's like a quarter of a mile to walk to my unit. So we have to get there a little earlier than our time. And first thing, I end up walking on the unit, and I have um, a gentleman that runs up to me and said, Miss P, so and so's cutting himself. And then another gentleman was yelling out of his cell saying, my cellmate just swallowed all of his pills. And then there was another gentleman yelling out of his cell saying that he wanted to commit suicide. I didn't even have I just walked on the unit and I got to throw my bag into a safe area and go over to where the person's cutting themselves. I had to shut the door so he wouldn't come at me with the sharp object, and then try to convince him to put down the razor or whatever he's got because he's bleeding all over. I had to call for backup. So I'm carrying probably 20 plus pounds on me just just with my utility belt, not only the radio, keys, handcuffs, leg irons, flashlight, you name it, I got it on me. And then as soon as personnel got there to take care of that situation, I ran up to another tier to figure out who it was, and gentleman was waving me down and letting me know that his cellmate just swallowed all of his pills. And I'm like, sir, what did you swallow? And it could have been a ploy. It could have been, so I have to maneuver these situations very delicately.
Yeah, sure.
The gentleman just showed me the pill case with his name on it and what he took, and he swallowed the whole thing of aspirin or whatever, um, Tylenol, whatever it was. So then I had to call for someone. He's got to go to the hospital and get his stomach pumped. So we had to call for an ambulance to get him to the hospital. Um, they had to take care of the other person, so they're going to take care of the cutter. He's got to go to the hospital too. And after that's taken care of, and I got people locked in because they can't be roaming around when there's ambulance staff on the unit. Then I run downstairs after we take care of that gentleman and just to check on the person that was yelling out of his cell that he wants to commit suicide. And I walk up to him and I said, "Sir, do you really want to commit suicide?" He's like, "No, Miss P, I just want a sock." You know, there's, and that kind of like de-escalated a little bit with
You're
my,
like, you could have said that. That would have helped
yeah,
me.
you know, and these guys know that I'm going to address everyone because I always had a notebook with me, like a little notebook, and then I would mark down, okay, cell number, blah, 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 needs his mail, then get it. This person's missing a sock, they have a hole in it. I got to go get that person a sock. And so I would really try to make sure that I would follow up with the gentleman that I was supervising. Another
And you
sit,
said, didn't you say you had like how many men at a time?
100.
Yeah, just to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and if there was anything going on, I would call for backup. Doesn't mean that my sergeant would be responsive or not, depending upon what was going on with them. There could have been something else going on the other side of the unit. A sergeant is in charge of two units of 200 people, 100 on each side, and then you have one officer on each side to take care of the gentlemen that are on those units. And then you frequently would have a floater, but that doesn't mean that they're going to float to your side to help you with anything. They're just sometimes they're, flirting with the sergeant in the bubble. Sometimes they're hiding in the corner that they know there's no cameras or hiding in the bathroom. I don't know where they are. Um, Sometimes they'd show up, sometimes they wouldn't. So I did chow by myself. There would be 50 individuals that would come out and then they would be issued the chow. Um, I also had to hire at this other institution 6 of the gentlemen that were on the unit to help run the unit. So you had to be mindful of who you were picking and choosing who to help you. Um,
Hmm.
I particularly found that people that would get along and talked appropriately to other people were my best bets. Um, People that didn't have numerous incident reports written on them for their behaviors, I could not make them a swamper or someone that would help on the unit. So we were strictly told we cannot hire anybody that has any kind of write up or a warning or anything. And I'm like, okay. So that kind of narrowed it down to who I could pick and choose to help out on the unit. High stress, that is an understatement. It was humongous amounts of stress. Because I was doing doubles, it would be almost an hour for me to drive home and an hour to drive back. So it wouldn't give me a whole lot of time to get rest. Self-care goes out the window. You're spending more time with your coworkers than you are your family. There's, like I said, there's no self-care. The numbers of officers have decreased over the last couple years because of retirements, because people were fired or terminated, which is, if they did something really, really horrible, I can see that. But the central office, they would pick and choose who they were going to have terminated. And it could be based on a small little paragraph with no investigation. So they would get rid of you for anything, even if the upper staff wanted you out, they would just make something up or gaslight you. They would just find an in for something. Um,
And as a
uh,
woman, you mentioned as well that since there were more men in the unit, so naturally you'd have prisoners who are men who obviously, I mean, they're men. They aren't able to have their wives with them. They're not able to have their girlfriends. They've got their own things going on, so they're probably yelling at you tons of stuff and saying
mhm,
things they'd like to do. And then you've
yeah,
got, you said officers who were male, but they didn't respect you even though they weren't in prison. They were working there. So
yeah,
how would you handle the comments coming from officers, because it's a different thing than the prisoners, because with the prisoners at least there's bars, or at least there's some authority structure that you have something you can do. But with a fellow officer, I would think it's much more complicated with how to address a situation like that.
right. Um, I guess it depends on the person. There were women that came in there um, that were not taught how to keep themselves safe. So that's why I talked earlier about women need to have their own individual training just to set them up for success and not failure.
Yeah.
So you have to change certain things about you. So me coming from working on Playboy centerfolds, so you have to know the difference between men and women. Um, Men are more visual, women are not. And that has to do with the success of Playgirl. It wasn't very successful because women don't connect like that. Women connect with their heart.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true.
Males are predominantly visual. And so I would wear oversized uniforms to keep myself safe, not skin tight ones, because some of the female officers would wear skin tight uniforms. Um, I had to change what I washed with, shampoo or soap, I was very careful to not wash with anything that had any kind of smell to it. So it was trying to find something that you just washed and it didn't have a odor to it because that could attract attention to you. I did not wear makeup because that would attract attention to you because you're dialing yourself up for what?
That's a
This
good
is
question.
not a one-way show and how this this is not a who can I attract kind of thing. If you're walking,
Yeah.
if you're a woman and you've got two legs, everybody's going to be attracted to that. Because gentlemen obviously are locked up and they're in there for a long period of time, and that's the only exposure they get to a woman. Um, with the staff many times were very inappropriate in the way that they talked to female staff. There were some women that were followers, and then there's some women that are leaders. The followers were just go and they would drink with them, go to the bars with them, go do other stuff. That's on them. Whatever they're getting into or whoever they're dating, that's not any of my business. I was there to do a job, and that's what I did. Not only was I doing a job, I was also in school at the time. I had 3 kids at home. I was working this full-time job, sometimes being ordered another shift. That was my priority. It wasn't hanging around with my coworkers and rolling with them. I didn't do any of that. I didn't approve of people coming on my unit that smelled like booze from 10 feet away. I did not like that because a quarter of the gentlemen that were on my unit in there were had OWIs, DWIs, driving under after revocation, whatnot. Um, and are they going to respect that officer when they're walking around and they can smell that? No. Um, the state where I did my service, 20% of the population of correctional officers were women, and they were the highest terminated. The gentlemen or the male staff could get away with all kinds of stuff because they were buddy buddy with supervisors or whatever. They could get away with all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
The women, if you didn't follow, if you were not a follower, you were your own leader, they would find something to get rid of you if they didn't like what you were doing. And what I did was follow rules and regulations. I knew the codes better than HR and the deputy warden, believe it or not, because of the stress that I was under working in that field. It has caused my body to react. And I have autoimmune things that have happened to me since then. My body is still healing from that. I became lactose intolerant. Um, I have rosacea on my face that I have to keep under control based on my diet. I've had to change my diet based on the response my body gives me. I have Raynaud's syndrome with my fingers, but I have that under control based on what I eat and how I treat my body. Um, thank God I'm still here. I have all my teeth. Um, I take care of myself. Self-care is number one. I think that that job is not sustainable for long term for anyone in
Yeah, I was
a
gonna ask how long were you there?
I was at one prison for 4 years and the other one um, over 3 years. Um, I I valued the time that I got to spend in there, and I did my own background research on the population that I would be working with. There were things that were not taught to us, like, for instance, how people. There's some gentlemen that are going to look at you. Some people are not going to give you eye contact, and that is because they're showing respect to your position. The Hmong, they will not give you eye contact. They will look down. Those are kinds of things that are really important when you're working with certain populations, is to know culture, to know race, to understand the depravity of things that these populations have gone through. I think it's really important to know that and address people as such, like sir, or Mr., and get to know people's last names. I think that's really important, and you will survive it if you focus on what you need to do to serve the population in the utmost respect and honor. Um,
Well, one thing I was gonna say too is I'm just thinking of you as a mom just coming home completely exhausted, and you have another job that's full time, being a mother to these kids.
Mhm.
And what you've seen and what you've experienced isn't something you can bring to a kid and be like, hey, listen to how my day went.
Right.
Um, you are very much like, no, that has to be something I'm going to share with someone else, if anything, but it's going to be another adult. It can't be my kids. I can't bring that to them. How
Mhm.
did you do that? Because that to me is incredible. I don't know how you'd pull that off because I alone am burdened by the world and I'm not a correctional officer. I'm a legal assistant. That's my tolerance level for you. Um, like how did you do that coming home to your kids and you're like, here I am, I'm mom. I'm turning off
It
that
was
part.
it was very hard because I would come home and I would be dysregulated
I'm
from
sure.
my day. I would have that hour drive home where I would try to debrief in the car and swear and cuss in my own safe space at the things that were totally unbelievable that I just saw, or I would make sure that I would take notes of where I was, what I was doing, who I was working with, what incident reports I wrote, the numbers. I had to notate that every single day to track things because there were things that were going on that were very inappropriate. There's some incident reports that may have disappeared because they were covering for their guy friends at the higher level. And I never found out about what had happened with that person. Um, there were situations where I would tell the gentleman that just got beaten up by staff, you know, you can report this to or find a family, call a family member and get yourself, an attorney or a lawyer or something. And and I these people I spent every single day with, and that is inappropriate. I know darn well there's cameras all over. So for for them to say that there's no cameras anywhere and oh, we don't know what happened or emails go missing, that's all sus. That's all sus and cover-ups of things that go on inside. Um, I feel as though I may not be doing time with the individuals that are in there, but I actually am doing time. It's just not behind a door. Um, the way that I came home in the evening, um, being dysregulated myself, and I'm sure that had some effect on my own kids. Um, I'm very proud of all my children. They all went on to go to college. Um, they honorably served in the military. One is a nurse, I'm very proud of. Um, my other sons, they're doing amazing things with what they can do, especially the one that has traumatic brain injury. Um, I give my kids credit for putting up with it because I couldn't go to their games. I couldn't go to, their wrestling matches or basketball game. Every once in a while, I could go do one of those things, but it wasn't a regular thing where I could go every week because, all of a sudden I got to work another shift. And I don't think my kids really realized, what I was going through, but to put food on the table for them, to make sure that they go get, you know, clothes that don't have holes in them. They conducted themselves appropriately when they went to school. Um, the information that I have that I will reveal in my next book was that I too was homeless. I was a homeless 16-year-old single mom with a 6-month-old child. So there are those aspects in me that I feel a lot of empathy for others. And
That was not though when you started correctional
that
officer.
was
That was just
before
in your past.
Yes, that was before I went into corrections.
Hmm. So you'd experienced a lot of suffering. So you had a lot of empathy.
Yes. I think that helped me to be the person who I am.
Lisa, can I ask you, just because I'm thinking to myself, and this is an honest question, just because I want to, your thoughts on this. You've mentioned a few times, like, by God's grace, praying, things like that. And I wanted to ask you, because I am a Christian, and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I don't know how this woman could go through so much turmoil, not just in her personal life, but in a public sphere as well, and be so strong and just have the spirit of gratitude for life. Like, what really struck me is when you said, I have my teeth. Most people are like, it's like, what do you appreciate about life? They don't say, I have my teeth. Like, just the very basic, right? But you have such a, like, you have such a good attitude even while you were there that I think many people couldn't or wouldn't have. And do you, like, seeing all of this and experiencing all of this, do you have any spiritual awareness, or like do you see God as part of the picture of your life? Or for you, I can also see how if you're seeing so much of this and the evil on both sides, people who commit crimes and then people who are supposed to take care of those who have,
Mhm.
you're like, forget God. There is no God here because life's pretty suck. I mean, I can see how you would feel that way too. So I wonder for you, like, is there a specific perspective you lean towards more?
Um, I'm not I'm not religious. There's a difference between being religious and spiritual. I lean more towards the spiritual aspect because I think in my life something has been there to keep me safe. Um, Picture this. This is something that I always thought of as, you know, we've read all these stories when we were younger or had them read to us, about Daniel in the lion's den and how he was being persecuted, but yet the lions left him alone. So when you bring light to dark spaces, um, people tend to gravitate to you in a way that can be touching. Um, they leave you alone. They see something in you that's good that they don't want to hurt or harm. I cannot speak for the gentleman that I supervised, but there are times where I felt, I'm a little guppy in a shark tank, and it's not only the gentleman that I'm on these units with, but also the staff.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel safe many times with staff because if you've read my book, I mean, just my first day, I was set up to fail
Yeah.
from the get-go, and how they set me up to fail just to scare me so I wouldn't come back the next day on purpose. Um, and to keep calm because I continue to work with the addiction population. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. Um, while I was going to school, but I also was a welder. I was also a CNC operator, whatever I could do to get through school. And I put myself through school for a very long time. 30 years I've been in school. I just completed my fifth degree, which is my master's. Um, I've had several careers in different areas. Um, the point being is the reason why I'm bringing this up is Just had a conversation with a coworker that there is a strong difference between counseling and law enforcement. Law enforcement is about security, and that's it. There is counselors that are focused on the individual and helping them to answer their own questions. But there's also very fine intersects that come into play that cross, the counseling going into law enforcement and law enforcement thinking about the counseling. It's
Oh
part
yeah.
of humanity. There's I look at LinkedIn a lot, and it's where I keep all my folks that I learn a lot from, or keep connections open, because there could be questions or things that I'm reading from them, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see your presentation, or congratulate. And I love to see people succeed. And that makes me very happy to see people be successful in their life from the things that they've overcome. um, I've always been the underdog in my life. I've always been the one that's been bullied or tossed to the side without a care, um, even from my parental figures in my life. And I don't want other people to feel that they are just a number, but they are an actual person. And I want to treat that individual with the respect and dignity that they deserve, no matter what they've gone through. Um, my dream job would either be to work with veterans full time, and or into a correctional facility to work with the gentleman to get um, to start that healing process, even if it's using EMDR or brain spotting, or having those groups focused on addiction recovery. Um, there's a lot of stats that I know about survival rate after people get discharged or released from a jail or a prison. The first 12 weeks after they get released is where death rates are very high for those that have an addiction if they don't get the help they need. They don't get in a residential, they don't get into a methadone treatment facility where they have methadone or Suboxone or Vivitrol. I'm concerned about those folks, and I do still work with that population. Um, and I do it with the same grace and dignity that I would have when I was in there. Sure, I had to set really strong boundaries in there, and I didn't want my gentlemen to, walk around with holes in their clothing. I wanted to give them that dignity, and I still do that today, and I do care. And I think that's the thing that really makes me who I am, is because I do care. I genuinely care about, the folks that I serve. And I want them to get the most out of a counseling session when they do come in. And then I greet them and I get to know them as a person, and really focus on the things that are going on in their life, and in reminding them, what have they overcome already? And they've gotten through that, and they can get through another bump in the road or another mountain in the road that's in their way. They can get through that. It's just having that confidence and self-esteem in order to really realize, yeah, you know what? Thanks for reminding me. I needed to hear that. That these are the things I've overcome in the past, and I can get through this too. And just taking baby steps through the process of getting where they need to go, and through that ordeal or event or situation that they're going through, whether it be a legal situation, whether it be a death of a loved one, or past things that keep coming to fruition because their anxiety keeps them focused on what happened in the past and not what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I truly value the people that I work with. I There's people that ask, is there any client that you've disliked? No. I genuinely find something unique about each individual that I really like about that person. And it's a lot of resilience. Um, I love the fact that we're having this conversation because now that I'm transitioning into clinical mental health, I feel as though I can also focus on not only the mental health aspect of my clients in the future, as well as the addiction. And those are co-occurring.
Yeah.
One can start the other. An addiction can cover up a mental health issue, or a mental health issue can start with coping with illicit drug.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, I want to thank you for this. I mean, first of all, it was amazing to hear from you because I've not had much experience with this. And after hearing a few people share their stories as inmates, I was like, I really want to talk with someone who worked there because they would also have seen this and also have their own traumas and scars they bear. And so I'm really grateful that you wrote your book. I'm going to have a link below for listeners. If you're listening, there will be a link on her name, but if you are watching for the website, there's a link under the podcast. But there'll be a way to go directly to Amazon and you can purchase her book. It's not very long, and it's her memoir. And like she said, she's potentially writing another book, it sounds like, too. And she's on LinkedIn. You type in her name, Lisa Purtue. She comes up, and you're going to see that she recently graduated with licensed in substance abuse for counseling. And she's very active on LinkedIn. She's got a lot of connections. So it's a pretty active page, so you can stay informed if you want to know more about maybe a potential book or what she's working on. And if you have questions, she's very accessible. Like I was able to get in touch with her pretty quickly and she was very responsive. So if you have questions, I really would encourage you to reach out to her because I think she'd welcome that.
And
Um, so Lisa, thank you again. It's been such a gift to talk with you, and I've learned a ton, and I'm so grateful we had this conversation.
thank you. I appreciate your invitation, and there will be more books to come, and it's going to be a series. That the first book is just an introduction to, and there's going to be many, many more stories that will be included in future books. And I hope people enjoy them or give me feedback or even give a review of what they got from it, and just seeing the humanity involved in it and what I offered with what I've seen or experienced. Um,
Well, I can tell you that I do not think of you as a person who worked on Playboy books. That's not what I got out of this. So
Good.
you did it. You did it.
Yeah, I did that. Yes.
You did. All right, Lisa. Well, blessings to you and thank you so much.
Thank you. You too, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.